I'm recording.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Excuse me, my crayon isn't working. I find
I'm interested in learning a bit more about technology, philosophy, and I like to...
I'm an educator.
Absolutely. We're going to stay anonymous.
that's a cop out.
The binary skeleton. I thought jingle was like Dutch for cheers.
I'm Becs, and I guess I am the hated feminist from a couple of episodes ago.
Have you had any hate mail? Did you have
No,
any angry
actually,
responses?
I had angry responses about you.
Yeah, so can we talk about that?
Well,
because
give me
I
a
was
second.
I started being a feminist for a day, and it was tough.
Okay.
It was tough. I'll give you a second. I'll give you whatever you want. Go for it.
No, well, I thought, if you don't mind, that I'd kind of give my perspective on that. Just because the reaction surprised me. So,
should we explain the reaction first? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good
context.
idea. Yeah, okay, let's do that.
So, I was very excited. I've spent a lot of time preparing for this episode because it's very hard, as we discussed, to find someone willing to come on and debate feminism. And that's very much what we're all about. And I was really excited to share it with the people who I know to be feminist, and the feedback wasn't universally negative, but mostly. And I was told I was very dismissive of you and combative, and even that it was two men ganging up against one woman. So yeah, you were also surprised by that.
Well, yeah, okay, so just to explain, a little boring fact about me is that I am a very nervous public speaker about anything. So it was my choice to ask my very lovely partner to join. I don't need a male crutch. It's just like
Nice to have an emotional support German.
And my emotional support German, exactly. But so I would like to think, to be honest, that and people were, in this respect, supportive and empowering of me doing something that is completely out of my comfort zone, because it very much is. But I did go into this, obviously having listened to the podcast, quite a bit, knowing that Chris, or Cookie as I call him, his role is to be an antagonist. He is the presenter. He wants to try to be the devil's advocate and then see what the responses to that would be. It seems perfectly logical to me. So I went into this expecting that. And I got that, and I'm cool with it. Like I didn't feel overpowered. I felt supported. Even though I haven't converted him yet, I'm still proud of the discussion that we had. So for the 3 or 4 men and women that wrote to me worried about it, they're really, I promise you, there's nothing to worry about. He's a super soft pussycat. He's really nice to me, and he's also my friend. So there were no hard feelings taken, and I felt that he was just doing his job. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Thank you. I think it positions it well. I struggled. It's interesting when you send a podcast to someone. It is, hi, this is an hour and a half. Normally, a lot more hours before it of research of my heart and soul. Please judge it favourably. And that gets mixed in with the fragile backlash when people were like, oh, you were to this, you were to that. I was like, well, excuse me, like, fuck you, I'm trying, right? And it was that, like, well, this is why no one likes feminism. You guys are far too sensitive and there's no talking with you. You can't have your religion ever questioned. It doesn't work with your dogma. But, I do like to sit on things for a few days and think about them from a few angles. I think the other one is, to be honest, my intended audience with the questions I was asking in the conversation we were having wasn't for a feminist. It was Feminism 101. It was feminist, not even feminism for beginners. I would say my intended audience were men who are against feminism
GCSE
by default.
feminist.
But no, not even beginner.
No?
People that are like already have decided against it.
Oh,
So that was my intended
gosh,
audience,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
And I thought,
So you had to speak to them. In
play
a way.
devil, yeah, because for me that's the most interesting. I'm not interested in preaching to the choir. I really wanted for people that see the word feminism and go, ugh. I wanted them to hear me laying out the steel case for their best, steel man for their best arguments, right? And you confidently, I thought, despite the nerves at the start, debunk them, right? And I can explain, yeah, but here's why that's nonsense. And so, for me, mission accomplished, like, really, because I think we had a good conversation where we debunked pretty thoroughly, I thought, some of the common tropes leveled against feminists. And that is worth having, even if someone that's, as you say, not GCSE, but post-doc feminist would be like, oh, this conversation's frustrating. And that I get, to be honest. Like, that's often the thing, is that it's very hard for thought leaders in this world for them to be like, oh, why do we always have to go back to GCSE Basics Feminism 101 and the misconceptions? But yes, for praxis, rhetoric, and persuading the unconverted, it's just a necessary evil.
Yeah. You know, I couldn't agree more. And we'd kind of already decided we were going to do a follow-up, so that would be a 101 of sorts. But I mean, you did get some, I thought, some relatively good feedback in the Beyond Binary message section from a woman who does not identify as a feminist. In fact, I'm pretty sure she said she hates feminists, but she felt that it was actually a very measured and reasonable discussion, and she didn't come out of it feeling like she hated anyone.
That's nice.
I mean,
best you can hope for with a topic that's apparently very controversial.
Well, yeah, you know, because I will admit that for this particular episode that we're doing now, I have been doing some digging into the women against feminism sort of movement, and I mean we'll talk about that a little bit later. But you know, I'm with you. I believe one should. I'm going to use a terrible expression now, and that's okay. Know thine enemy. You know, understand their perspectives, and you know they've got some that are some perspectives that are really valid and interesting, and the fact that feminism as a movement can be it's not very inclusive a lot of the time, but then you've also got a lot of misconceptions which they very openly espouse, which is the fact that feminists are all Marxist vegans, and you know, and that's terrible.
Yeah, so there is this cultural Marxist trope that is literally from a binary definition of you're either with us or you're left.
Yeah, that's what
Marx
the title.
himself.
That's what the title of this goes to. I feel like there should be, if you don't mind me saying, there should be some background given here on the title. So Chris and I were in the car the other day, and we had a very, very brief conversation about this, and I said something to the effect of, without going into the nuances and without having the opportunity to go into the nuances because we were with his family, you're either a feminist or you're a misogynist.
Yeah.
So I didn't say it in that exact way, but did you want to start with that line
I
of
think
argument?
it tees it off perfectly.
Or...
So, as you've alluded to, it's a soundbite. It's a succinct summary of a deeper essay that needs to be had. So I think it is an example of dogmatic black and white thinking. You're either with us or against us. And it does, if said in isolation, which as you said it shouldn't be, it does speak to something that your critics allude to. It's the problem with a tweet, right? Because, yeah, once you start thinking that you're either converted or you're an apostate, you're a heretic. I don't imagine that persuading anyone to your cause.
No.
And Despite evidence to the contrary, I still believe some feminists want to persuade people.
Yeah, I would love to persuade, you know, but also, you know, I think it would be naive and unwise to think that that's going to happen, or that's even capable of happening. But just to be clear, and we went through the definition of feminism in the last episode. Just to recap, it is just the desire for social, political, and legal equality between men and women. That is to say, there are many different fractions of feminism that are more radical, imperialist. Of course, you've got TERFs, you've got the anti-sex work feminists, and it can get very complicated. But yeah, down to its basic definition, it is just a desire for equality, and equality is not there. And the thing is, you can have, and I've had many conversations with people, and I ask them, I do that annoying thing that the Women Against Feminist group really, really hate. You know, do you believe in equality of the sexes? And they say yes. And I say, well, technically you are a feminist, but that's okay that you don't want to use that term. That's fine. The problem is, if you are against equality of the sexes, then yes, by definition, you are either what's known as a masculinist or a misogynist. And I mean, I'm just talking semantics here, but you know, that's the way it is.
Yeah, obviously the counter argument is that most people don't feel feminists are pushing for equality, and I think this often gets lost in the culture wars.
Yeah, lots of people get misandry confused with with feminism. Misandry, for those that don't know, is women hating men, and that being the reason for feminism.
Which is a thing. I think there's men that hate women and women that hate men, and men that hate themselves and women that hate themselves.
The difference, though, as we will talk about a little bit later, is in how it's expressed. You know, the men that hate women are committing murder, are ramming cars, I mean, we'll talk about not all. No, no. But there is a problem with incel violence, to the extent that there are authorities and scholars even debating whether to class it as a terrorist group, about the history of anti-women and anti-feminist propaganda, because it does explain a lot of the tropes that get associated with feminists today.
Cool. Perfect.
And so obviously, like, we can go way back and look at the story of Adam and Eve and the way that Eve was victimized. Do you know anything about the about what the word where the word hysteria comes from?
It's odd to me that it shares a base with hysterectomy.
Well, so it's actually the ancient Greek word for uterus. Right. So you weren't far off, and that was essentially used against women to, especially opinionated women, to class them as not being of sound mind.
So that trope, if a woman's angry,
exactly,
is it the time of the month?
Exactly, that's what it comes from, and the hysterical woman trope is very embedded in the feminist movement. Apparently, we're all angry all the time and offended by everything, but you have to acknowledge that this hysteria, which was the word for the mental illness itself, led to the death of a lot of women at the hand of men. It played a part in the Salem witch trials, for example. It's been opinionated or different women have been victimized for standing up, for being a little bit different, under the guise that there was something fundamentally wrong with them, cognitively or mentally. But then, we could get, I mean, if we want to get into more recent history, have you ever looked at any anti-suffragette propaganda? It's obviously, this is not long ago. So I fully recommend that people check out the posters, because it's really, I mean, they're really funny. I can see the humor in them. the anti-suffragette propaganda is where the crazy cat lady trope came from, obviously, which, still reigns supreme today. If you look at the posters, they'll have like men washing the dishes, with slogans like, "Is this what it's come to?" So like portrayals of being a suffragette or a women's rights fighter, will demasculize men. There's posters with children in terrible situations being neglected. My mother is a suffragette with the title. And then there's also the depiction of marriage as a cure. So one of my favorite posters, actually, and you can look it up. It's called "The Origin and Development of a Suffragette," and it has a little poem with it, which I find really interesting. At 15, a little pet. At 20, a little coquette. At 40, not yet married. At 50, a suffragette. And obviously, the way that the suffragettes were portrayed is still very much how feminists are portrayed. We are apparently singletons and anti-men,
angry because you can't get laid.
Yeah, ugly. It's all carried through.
I do think that's a really interesting analysis, actually, because I noticed it researching our episodes on race, that a lot of the criticisms being levelled against the BLM movement were exactly the same tropes that were said against Martin Luther King Jr. And it's telling. I think it's a very good way of checking whether you're on the right path, is to look back. Because everyone says, oh yeah, well of course, like it's nice that women have the right to vote. I wouldn't have been against it back then. But now they're asking for too much, they're going too far. And it's like, I think just the forces of inertia and conservatism are always going to resist people asking for any rights or like freedoms and equality.
But it's, the reason that I was mentioning that, and as you said with the certain tropes against race equality fighters that are around these days, is because they still reign supreme, and they're still here, and they're still profoundly untrue and not based in anything, and they do put people off the feminist movement. I mean, look at how feminists are portrayed in pretty much any film. Maybe not so much today, but go back about 10 years.
Yeah, it's just there's a picture it's in your head, right? Joke, right? It's a butt of a joke. It's just that angry,
white woman with dreads. Usually, she might be wearing a dashiki for some reason. Like cat lady, she'll come out with some sort of complex sort of statement about the patriarchy, and
she'll hate the man, and she'll stop the fun.
Yeah, exactly. And that still reigns supreme. And I honestly think that these tropes are a huge put off for people. As an aside to the reasons that we've already discussed. This isn't me saying this is the only explanation. It's just something that we didn't touch in the last episode.
Yeah, so
I thought it might be.
So we didn't, because I think we got very Marxist, as most conversations with Christian often tend to get. But it's an interesting one. I've been thinking on this. I think there's nuance that needs to be discussed. I do worry when feminists become the movie police, right? Like, it doesn't seem to be the most pressing thing. I think there's a couple of things going on there. One is that there's a lot of people with degrees in media studies, and they're probably the most likely to be YouTubers, and the videos that are most popular are not likely to be analysis of academic textbooks, but popular media. So I think that's why so much of the conversation becomes about popular media. Someone writes a video, why this video is problematic, and then someone who's against feminism does a video response to why this video makes me angry, and the circle continues. I think what's needed in nuance and understanding is that, and I've really learnt this from Lindsay Ellis, who I've recommended some videos to you with. If your job is to watch Disney movies and give them some reviews, then that's not an example of feminists trying to cancel all of the movies in the world. That's just what she does. She watches movies and talks about them and applies a feminist analysis. And she's not, literally in a position of power where she can get Hollywood or Disney, the Disney Corporation, to stop making movies with certain themes or tropes that reoccur in society. It is okay for her to point out, why is this a trope, and is that a fair summary of women, female-male relations? I think that's often where it gets, it's okay to point out something is problematic. You're not necessarily being the cancel culture woke police. You can just have an opinion on something and be like, I have noticed there's a recurring pattern with women being portrayed this way, and I'd like to see film directors do better.
Yeah, and I think that they are. I do think that they are, but the issue, and as you've said, it very much carries into the racial equality debate, is that these things from the past do have a hangover that takes a long, long time to settle, and it has an effect on the movement as a whole. And as I said, just in my opinion, the movement is harmless. I mean, feminists aren't going around killing men in the name of feminism. Feminists aren't storming the Capitol in the name of feminism. What we're doing is, we protest, not anywhere near as violently as the suffragettes did, obviously. But I just don't think we deserve the hate that we're getting.
It's a pretty strong reaction.
It's really strong.
Big old backlash.
So don't you don't call yourself a feminist, right? Okay, fine. Definitions aside, it's not, if a feminist then starts pressuring you further in a really unfair way, then that's bad on them. That's not necessarily,
but in a world with billions of people, there will be some nice feminists and some annoying feminists and some persuasive feminists.
Absolutely.
At the same point, I've noticed a trope of men going around telling people, oh, you subscribe to this set of beliefs in academic literature, I think that's stupid. And then being like, isn't it surprising how every feminist I talk to is angry and rude to me? And you're like, yeah. Go around the Middle East telling everyone you think Islam is a stupid religion and see how your impression of Muslims changes.
Well, pretty much. Yeah.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you meet someone and they say, oh, I have some of these beliefs, and you go, those beliefs are stupid, you're not going to get a positive response from that person.
No.
Or a good conversation or their best rhetoric. So.
No. So where next with the conversation?
I think often, and again, this is if your focus and background is media, you say, I'd like to see this movie could have been better had it put a bit more spin on this character and not just lazily applied this cliche. And I think what gets misconstrued from the other side is feminists aren't saying, oh my god, if only we could change these 3 movies, then the world would be a better place.
No.
It's putting the cart before the horse. It's saying, because we live in a sexist world, you can see the ripples of that everywhere.
Exactly. It's not...
People are like, oh, why are you stressing that movie? It's like, no.
It's not the whole cookie. It's a crumb.
Yeah.
But
it's just a very easy to point out crumb because, this is a piece of mass media everyone's familiar with.
Yeah,
Let's center the discussion around that campfire.
Yeah. But I do also think, okay, so if we're gonna talk movies, I have very strong feelings about the rom-com genre.
Me too, by the way.
Well, yeah, or I'm going to call it the commercial romance genre right now. And for me, that is as harmful to men as it is women in relationships, in terms of the expectations, the very unreasonable expectations that it places on both sides.
Examples abound. And even the trope of because the girl is nice and virginal and would never be interested in sex with a boy, she has to spend most of the movie being no. But the guy is so persistent.
Yeah, or
that's definitely the strategy to pursue approaching women.
Or the trope of the useless dad, which is a really big problem. right? Like, you know, watch any movie. Well, you know, the majority of movies or series, as we said, not so much these days, still happens, but definitely from not that long ago. And dads are, you know, mums are the ones that get things done, and dads are the ones that will play, or, you know, like, you know, play baseball, and then they'll never be there, and they'll be having the affairs, and they might smack up the woman, and that's it. And it's not fair either, you know, like, it then feeds into the whole congratulatory trope of whenever a normal dad does a normal dad thing, people lose their shit.
Superhero.
Like, wow, congratulations! Like, come on, you know. I mean, these are reasons that I consider myself a feminist, because I'm a feminist because I don't like the way that society is towards men, women, trans people, and non-binary. I'm what's known as, I don't know if I said in the last episode, I'm what's known as an intersectional feminist, and that has been used badly by some celebrities in a very white feminist sort of way, which I don't think is fair. But it's important to note that the term came from the Black liberation movement in the 18th century. They need credit. It gained popularity with an amazing professor called Kimberly Crenshaw in the 90s, I think it was. And what it is, it's a feminist perspective of gender equality intersects with racial equality, class equality, you know, sexual equality, you know, ableism, disableism. It's all together. And I honestly believe to be a good feminist, you have to recognize when the other side, or when somebody that doesn't look like you, is getting a raw end of the deal. And that is a problem with the feminist movement in general, as, you know, as we've discussed. And it is also one of the very fairly cited reasons by Women Against Feminism group as to why they don't espouse to join the movement, because they don't feel part of it. And also they, for some reason, there's still this whole Phyllis Schlafly thing that they think that we're going to take away their right to just stay at home and have kids, when, you know, that's definitely not what any feminist that I know of has been trying to do anyway.
That gets to the crux of a crucial part of what I think is legitimate criticism towards some feminists. As I've often said with these movements, very often it comes from a place of white, middle-class, educated privilege.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
And when you read essays like why hip-hop is misogynistic, you're like, okay, like, that offended some WASP, dinner party etiquette, right? Like, these uneducated black men said some nasty things about women, and you're like, you're missing so many points there.
Yeah.
Like, it's really not the priority to get those gentlemen talking more politely.
No, it's, you know, it's about more than that.
But as you say, like, I think people intentionally love to pick up on that cliche and that trope.
Oh, the sensationalism.
So many examples, if you wanted to be honest, rather than just too easy pickings, as I always say, to find a stupid person saying a stupid thing on Twitter and pretend that that's either journalism, or gives you the right to criticize a movement philosophically. And if you, as I always say, look for the smartest people in the room and what they're saying, that is probably not the majority of conversations you'll have in the books.
But that, you know, they're like you said, that it is what will sell. So, for example, like arguments of women, you know, that in the news this will be featured where they want to use, you know, they think that the term herstory should be used above history always. Okay, right. As a
the
feminist,
news is brilliant at trivializing shit
well,
to what nothing
like,
wants.
Okay,
about, right?
You know, I mean, yeah, okay, if that's the term that you want to use, fine. But to be honest with you, as a feminist myself, I'm more concerned with the fact that 5 times more black women die in childbirth than white women in the UK, for example. And I'm also equally concerned with male suicide, which is a huge problem everywhere.
And the story just becomes a ridiculous soundbite.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I know how it happens as well. So an academic that deliberately courts press with a silly clickbait headline like, "We need to change history to herstory." And if you actually read the article at length, it would have some good points as well about, you know, the need for more nuance and understanding of language in important contexts to make these places more inclusory and accessible. But yeah, that the news runs with the dumb headline and then the talking heads. Don't read even the news article about the long thesis that's been written. They just read the headline and then that everyone reads that and goes, "Oh my god, feminism's bonkers."
And then it gets in, and then it gets into the red pill community, and then boom, you know, there you go.
Are we ready to go to the dark place?
Are we going to the dark place? The topic of incels and sort of the modern day misogyny movement is like quite fascinating to me.
Yeah, that's as good an intro as any. Go for it.
Yeah?
With obvious content and trigger warnings.
Let's start with the game.
Okay. Oh, so pickup artists.
Yeah.
The foot in the door of that deep, deep rabbit hole.
Yeah. I mean, look, like, you don't even say in a podcast, but see, like, the internet has had a huge effect on misogyny and bringing disillusioned, young, usually straight men, usually white, together, who are upset at their circumstances. Maybe they're not very confident, maybe they're a little bit nerdy, maybe they live somewhere where they're, you know, sheltered for whatever reason, and maybe they have some genuine mental health issues that haven't been explored. And then they blame women, but in particular the women's rights movement for it. And I'd like to share, and I got this from Behind the Bastards, so I'm gonna give them credit here, that group. I don't know if you know, but the men's liberation movement sort of started up, the one as we know it anyway, in the 1950s, and it was very joined with the women's rights movement. They worked together. Essentially, the war had finished, and women had got a taste of what it was like to get other jobs outside of the house.
So it was a people's liberation movement.
It was a people's liberation movement.
Men that had their little group and women that had their group, and they joined together.
And it was great. And that really lasted until the 70s. And then in the States and, you know, globally, there was economic decline. And the men in that movement, some of the men in that movement essentially decided to start blaming women for changing society as a whole and blaming them for the economic downfall instead of capitalism, which is what it is.
Yeah, the classic expression of anti-Semitism is the idiot's version of communism or socialism, right?
I mean, I've never heard that expression, but you know, I get what you mean.
Right? Like,
yeah, exactly. And so in the 70s, the men's liberation movement, that, like I said, had been working well together with the women's sort of liberation movement, broke away, and it became what we know of as the men's rights movement today. And a huge part of that was the culminated in the first, what is known as the first incel sort of mass murder, which was a guy called Marc Lepin in Canada, who, feeling disillusioned and being very much into Hitler and the men's rights movement as it was growing into, essentially walked into a Canadian university, the engineering college specifically, and shot up a bunch of women because he felt that they were taking positions at the college that should go towards men. And he told them that.
When was this?
This was in the this is either the early 70s or the late 60s. So I don't remember, but I think he killed about 50. He killed 15 women, injured like tons more, in the name of feeling disenfranchised that women were having, you know, more rights. But then affirmative action, yeah.
place and opportunities, right?
But then things, I mean, you know, obviously like incel killing and stuff really has increased and become more popularized in the noughties. So I guess that like the first example that we can give in recent history was you know, George Sedini. I'm just saying the names so that you can look them up. He walked into an LA Fitness and killed 10 women. Once again, he admitted this. There's proof of it. He was very much into the men's rights movement. He didn't feel that women should be, you know, anything but caregivers. Then obviously it moved on to the Elliot Rodgers case, which is super duper famous because he ended up influencing a lot of murders and mass murders that occurred after that, where essentially he walked onto a campus and killed 6 people because he wasn't getting laid enough. And what he did with that was essentially, before he went on this rampage, he wrote a very famous manifesto, which unfortunately you can read, decrying women's role in the world as it stands, and the fact that he was a perfect man. It's very much this whole alpha sigma attitude to things. He's a perfect man. There's a video of him talking about, look how beautiful I am. Look at what I'm wearing. It's Neiman Marcus. And he's, and in this manifesto, he's essentially blaming women for the fact that he's not getting laid. And he was very inspired by Sedini, for example. So that's why I bring them up. And the thing is that there have been countless, and it's on the increase, countless incel killings since. It is very much an established movement. Obviously, we mentioned a little bit before about the red pill community.
And before we move on, I think a lot of serial killers have targeted women as well, right?
Yeah, but they weren't targeted just because they were women. So I don't know, for example, globally, 38% of women that get murdered are murdered by their partners, male partners. Like, that's huge. That's a really, really big deal. And they were murdered, I guess, because they were women in their own right, but not because they wanted liberation for women. They were that person's partner. They were in a very vulnerable psychological situation where they were essentially molded and had the confidence that had really beaten out of them verbally or physically.
There's risk by an angry outsider, but there's even more risk at home.
Well, technically, yes, there is. But I mean, the problem that we mentioned at the beginning, the problem that we have is the internet culture, which has essentially decided to gamify how men can better approach women. So you've got these communities like Red Pill, where it's good in a way because it's a bunch of, you know, disenfranchised, disillusioned men for a whole bunch of reasons who are coming together to, to encourage each other to be a little bit more confident or work out a little bit more, feel a little bit better about themselves. But also... That's
how those groups sometimes start.
That's how they start. But the goal is to get women.
In fact, I think one of the founders of one of the main incel subreddits was a female who was on the spectrum. She was struggling and talking to these men who were also struggling.
You get a few women in the Red Pill community.
But she noticed that once the group was a few years old, there was just these darkening... they'd been going on for longer and longer and becoming more and more negative, and then just checking the group became this like masochistic exercise, and people self-flagellating and just posting about how they'll never be good enough and fuck them for not seeing my value, and she just watched it just turn darker and darker and darker.
But once again, a lot of their values espouse back to the fact that they think women should be caregivers and men should be leaders. Fact. Like that is the general consensus in there. So the problem with why they're not getting women is
that's why you're going to get pushback from me.
Okay.
It's not that I have a strong opinion. I'd like to play devil's advocate and think it through. And I think it's often...
There are studies, by the way.
I'll believe it. I'd like to hear about them. So I think it's a problem when you go through it like historical and literary analysis. There needs to be another lens. There's what people are typing in these groups and what's going on in the mind of the person behind the keyboard, right? And lots of different things going on at different points in that. I understand, the political movement from the 70s, but that's not necessarily what's at the heart of an angry 17-year-old who feels lonely and unloved.
No, but
typing about his frustrations.
But what's, I
right?
mean...
That's not, a 17-year-old isn't the patriarch.
I mean, look, the problem is that is repeatedly cited by these people. And once again, they have manifestos, they have letters, they're all over online, so this isn't just pulled out of nowhere. They keep blaming their problem on women's changing roles in society, instead of the fact that there is an attitude and a thought process problem. And what these communities unfortunately do, for however much they might encourage somebody to lead a healthy lifestyle, is they really ingrain that in people. Hence why more and more authorities and scholars alike are calling it radicalization.
Yeah, that I believe. And I think, as always, social media has a big part of the responsibility and the burden. These platforms move fast, break things, love these. Some of the worst parts of the internet are the most profitable. Because if you're being radicalized in a toxic group, you're probably checking for notifications and updates and how many people click like on your posts, more than most casual internet users realize.
Yeah, totally. But then, also... You're a member in there, and you see the game being referenced time and time again. So you go out and you try your hardest to use all of these techniques, and you get nowhere, and you get frustrated, and you get angry, and then you take it out on women. And
but that is a minority of people, right? So before we go darker.
Okay.
Right now, let's just have a breather, and I describe my experience as a 19-year-old virgin who found the game and went, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Because I was in a religious school in rural Cornwall where no one was having sex, was the truth. Like, I can name the 2 people that had sex before they left school at my school.
Was it an all-boys school?
No, but just it was, mostly very Christian, very rural, and just not many people were having sex.
I went to an all-girls Catholic school with the highest...
Oh, those were the best girls.
The highest teenage pregnancy rate in the region. It was just normal for them to slowly...
Well, unfortunately, I was a little bit too far away from that school, so I didn't have any such luck. And I think I actually filmed myself just desperately sad, just wanting to be loved and not feeling good enough. And to be honest, my strategy was to walk up to a girl and say, "I like you. Do you want to be my girlfriend?" And that never worked.
That's
ever.
adorable.
It's adorable. It's pathetic. And so for me, reading the game and being like, oh, that's really weak. That's really poor salesmanship. That's really bad self-presentation. No one wants... Because in my head, I was like, oh, there's all these guys just want sex. And if I pretend I'm not also one of those guys, then I might be a nice guy.
That old trope.
And I would be loyal and faithful and a brilliant boyfriend. So I'll just cut to that bit of my sales pitch. And you can't just approach someone and say, "Hi, I'm nice. Will you love me?" And so you read the game and you're like, to be honest, like most people, I think, I probably read the first 2 chapters and that was all. Be impressive. Don't be needy. Like, approach, make a good impression. And then withdraw.
Yeah, neg. Do you know what negging is?
I am familiar with negging.
You should explain to people what negging is, because they might not know. This is a technique that the game advises, one, by the way.
So I think I've actually learnt it since then from other pickup artists, but I believe the game's kind of the one, at least grail. One of the early movers. I'm sure there were books in the 1500s that people were writing about how
Oh,
to pick
but
up.
Hugh Hefner was a pioneer in that respect.
Sure, and Lord Byron. So the idea is that attractive women are used to being told often how wonderful they are, and they're just used to it. And everyone wants what they can't have, and everyone wants the unattainable. And so the worst thing you can do, they even talk about it in game theory value terms, none of which I think is negative in and of itself, by the way.
I mean,
there's an argument that Jane Austen is
untrue,
written in game theory terms.
It's untrue, but yeah.
Well, okay, whether you disagree with the economics and the maths and the models,
Psychology.
fine. But I think sometimes, the idea of using tactics or strategy is seen as evil in and of itself. But like I say, even Jane Austen is written in the style of zero-sum game, prisoner dilemma, game theory, economic models. It is what it is. People who want something from someone else either understand the tactics or are intentionally naive. And as a culture, we all like to pretend we never think through how the best way is to talk to someone for our own advantage, because that's not a nice thing to do. And we're all nice people.
No, everyone strategizes.
Yeah.
But the intention isn't to trick a particular person into doing something that they might not want to do. And the arguments against negging, for example.
Okay, let's start with my perception of negging then. So I can either walk up to you and say, I think you're really pretty, or I can walk up to you and
beat me down a bit,
lower
verbally.
your self-esteem a bit,
so that I'm more malleable, and then I'm going to be more
you're
attractive
looking for that winning combo of an attractive girl with low enough self-esteem that she'll settle for you.
Yeah, that's the theory.
And if she's not there to find, then you can actually tilt the odds in your favour. Put your finger on the scale.
That's not a nice thing, is it?
Yeah,
there's strategy.
But neither's trying to pursue people every week for 2 years and failing to have any love. That's not a nice thing either.
No.
I agree with you that there could be nicer schooling in that area.
Yes.
And there probably is, but not that's a popular book that I know of, because people always look for the easy shortcut hacks. Yeah. You see it in all sorts of these speakers, these influencers. How
to become a millionaire in 10 days.
In 10 days, right? Like how to convince supermodels that as a 17-year-old boy they should be sleeping with you. Like, it's jokes, but that's the books that sell, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So you were going to go through how.
Well, no, I was, that I thought that it would be worth it to mention some of the stars of the shit show, if you don't mind. Some of my favourite stars. Okay. And Neil Strauss and the game are like two entities in and of itself.
The founding fathers. Yeah.
So then I thought that I'd talk about 12 rules. My friend Leo,
Geordie P.
Of course. So I mean, like stuff that this book covers, for example, that makes me more feminist and more want to fight for equal rights. I mean, obviously, like the book itself is a love letter to the resentment of the lack of privilege due to other people getting opportunities. That's a fact. But there are really harmful premises in there that aren't data-based at all, that are completely untrue, and then once again feed into common tropes. So, for example, one of the things he says is men want girls and women want people, and obviously that feeds into the whole stereotype that women just want to be caregivers. Obviously we touched upon that in the last episode, so I'm not going to go into great detail there. But then one of the ways that it becomes also increasingly more harmful and increasingly more misogynist, and my friend wasn't very happy when I called Jordan B. Peterson a misogynist, but he is the whole espousement of enforced monogamy as a cure for incels, which he has said, and he says in there repeatedly. I
don't know why I always end up playing advocate for Jordan Peterson, but there's an interesting perspective there, especially with a capitalist analysis. There is a danger of the rich taking all.
I mean, yeah.
And if you look, that happens in all societies. And it's not just the money, and it's not just the education, and it's not just the healthy babies, but it pretty soon becomes, I want all the women. And I've actually experienced this. I've been in a small village where, especially in the low season, most of the foreigners that were there were teachers working for the school that I owned. I was a small warlord. A very pathetic, tiny one. But I was, young and in my prime and owned 2 businesses and doing very well. And honestly, frankly...
You had a good time.
Slept with everyone.
But then why would...
My friend was like, oh, I'm worried. I don't want to date a girl that you've slept with. I'm like, oh, sorry, mate. I'll let you know if I think of one.
But surely you think that the answer of enforced monogamy to that so that the other villagers could share in your spoils is inherently not just misogynist but authoritarian.
Well, it is, and it's odd, but it's what's happened over time. And again, I think, I don't think it's fair to say that although the headline of a feminist meme can be taken out of context, we need to then do the same for Geordie P.
Oh my god, no.
Okay, well, then for me and what I'm about to say.
Okay.
Because I hate having to defend him when I have my own thoughts on it. So let's do that.
All right.
So this is a problem that occurs in human societies again and again and again, which is why monogamy is a thing you see enforced again and again and again. Because when you have polyamory and freedom, that sounds great in theory, but like all freedoms, there needs to be checks and balances because things go shit quickly if you just let the richest and most powerful accumulate everything.
Yeah.
And you can go to certain countries where the king will have 48 wives.
I mean, there are cultural elements to that, but yeah.
And there are, like in China, for example, where there's not enough women, and there'll be. It's quite common, actually. I don't know if many people know this. If you're a millionaire in China, to have 6 wives.
Yeah, you buy them from the Ukraine and China.
Or even before that, like just if you're earning a certain amount in Eastern Asia, it is expected that you will not be monogamous, because why would you be? Even in Islam, where in some countries they still celebrate polygamy, and you get the same with certain Mormons, although it's frowned upon these days. The church pretty much says, as long as you can afford it, if you can afford 3 houses and pay for 3 kids, and then you're allowed. The community and the church will support that. And that's devastating. You talk about the problem of working class struggle and not having enough, and the idea of just like the Elon Musks and Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, now he's single of the world, hoovering up all of the potential partners. And if you're struggling under the wheel of capitalism, no love for you, sorry, is tragic.
It's tragic. But it's also not the fault of the women's rights movement.
No. Totally take that point. But it's a problem that needs to be addressed somehow, and has been addressed in many societies.
Has it?
Yes, with the encouragement of monogamy. There's an argument why the reason Christianity grew so quickly was because by enforcing monogamy, it encouraged children to be looked after more. There's a great book called Darwin's Cathedral, which I strongly recommend, where that's the central premise, that the pagans were just, sleeping around and travelling around, and then you ended up with just, a village of kids, which is lovely until something goes wrong and there's a bunch of kids who no one's there to defend and protect. So it's a problem that has evolved, and it's the reason why we have an instinct for monogamy, because those that didn't haven't survived as well. I'd say there's an evolutionary basis why, like a lot of animals, we gravitate towards monogamy. Now, the idea of top-down hierarchical government enforcing it on anyone is fucking stupid as a solution. Never works. And the irony of Jordan Peterson, who's terrified that a feminist might speak at a university because that is style in work camps, then saying, but you know what we should do is put women in breeding camps.
Yeah.
The hypocrisy of that is laughable.
Yeah.
But so I don't agree with his solution, but he is picking at a problem.
I mean, but
in
this
a
is what he
capitalist
does.
free society, yes.
He picks around the edges, and then that's how he draws in a vulnerable audience. And then he gets into more fucked up shit.
Yes. But
And
in a
then fucks
capitalist
up people.
free society, and when you look at things like Tinder and hookup app culture,
Yeah.
there are
weight
10%
issues.
of the men who are probably doing what I did 10 years ago and sleeping with, 40 women a month.
And then there are men that are just saying yes to everyone.
Because
it's the only choice.
And getting nothing.
Yeah.
and that's it. If you have the most attractive six-pack models with a photo of them on a yacht sleeping with everyone, that means that, and these apps monetize on the fact that people pay for super likes and pay for a premium thing, and I'm hearing from many of my close friends that it's just diminishing returns, and the business model is because there's a few models smashing, there's a few people sleeping with, let's call them a 9 out of 10 guy. If you want to commoditize people, it's disgusting, but that's the business model of these apps.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then 90% of the money comes from all the people who are just desperately sad, being ignored, and no one's swiping on, and no meetings are happening.
Yeah. And it gets even totally, and it gets even worse for black and brown people, black and brown men more apparently statistically. There's a whole bunch of studies on that.
And
but,
so I think that's the important side that
is.
Men's right movement versus women's right movement needs to take into account. There's a lot of sad people being fucked by capitalism. It's not just men versus women. Well,
exactly. So then then the problem of capitalism ties in with toxic masculinity and the obviously the unreasonable standards that it places upon men and women. Another reason that I'm a feminist, and another reason that I'm a feminist that does not support the fashion industry in any way, shape, or form. I will dress however I want, and I will not be dictated to by the second. I know I'm getting onto other subject now.
No, it's okay.
For those that don't know, the fashion industry as a whole is the second most polluting industry in the world.
It's pretty fucking evil. Lot of child labour, a lot of slave labour in its supply chains.
Terrible, but
that £6 dress you bought, there's a price there somewhere.
Yeah, it came. It came at a cost of it came at a cost of the earth. So the water and the raw materials that were needed to produce it, and then the labour
just touching the
was needed
chemicals
to
required to make those materials and what it does to the workforce. Yeah. It's fucking dirty. I know because my wife is a fashion designer, and you try making clothes ethically.
It's very hard.
Costs £90 a dress.
Yeah, pretty much.
No one wants to pay that because they can buy it for £7.
Yeah, exactly.
To make a dress for £7, as I say, the hidden externalities you don't want to know.
No.
But and it's one of those industries that, again, in a very capitalistic, predatory way, feeds on telling women
and
not
men
attractive enough. Men,
you need to work out more. You're bold, so nobody's gonna want you. You're too short, so nobody's gonna want you.
This is sexy.
There's
if you're not handsome, maybe you can buy a $2,000 suit, and maybe someone will sleep with you.
Or even like there's a really good documentary from a few years ago called, I believe it's called Low Hung, and like about the media pressure against men with smaller penises,
right?
And the damage that does for them, and the fact that then they can't get a partner, and it's a really good documentary. I do recommend that people check it out. But it's unfair. I mean, that's a standard that from toxic masculinity, that I'm fundamentally against.
So how do we pick this apart though? Because if you don't want Jordan Peterson telling women they should be monogamous.
No,
do you
enforced
want to
monogamy.
Enforce monogamy.
If he wants to say, well, I mean, no. I guess I don't want him telling people what they should do with their sex lives.
Right, exactly my point. Do you want to live in a world where we tell the fashion industry what they can put in adverts, where we tell all these companies like how they can and can't put their messaging to people? Like media representation. Oh, I don't want like this or that in the movie. Like if all of these are so damaging and toxic, aren't you also proposing another sort of prohibition?
I mean, prohibition in and of itself never works. But, you know, I do preach and discourage supporting that sort of thing as much as you can. I buy clothes. I need to wear clothes, and sometimes I feel like dressing up nice. But I don't buy clothes often. Maybe once a year. I don't feel that I need that. And I also don't feel that I feel like a terrible feminist when I look at the Kardashians and I'm like, okay, I do think fundamentally they're useless and see like capitalist machinery to the extreme. But they are also business people. And yeah, they had money there to start off, but they really made a brand their own at the expense of other women. Like, there's
So speaking of that, how do you feel about sex work? Because I think Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian are famous examples of porn stars that did one tape or maybe two and got really well paid for it. Like, it's one of those things where it's better to air quotes leak a tape and get $100,000 for it than do it as a full-time job. So how... because sex work's one of those issues, as you said earlier, that divides feminists.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it does. So you get they usually older feminists which are against sex work. So my field of study isn't actually feminism and women's rights. It's slavery and human trafficking. So I'm very interested in labour rights and stuff like that. And I, for example, I studied the Nordic model of kind of sort of light decriminalization that they have over there to see if that improved the lives of sex workers. I'm pro decriminalization. I am pro regulation of the industry, like any industry should be regulated to a certain extent. And
prohibition often causes more problem.
Absolutely, but then it also needs to be acknowledged that if somebody is against sex work because they are worried that the person is going to be trafficked, I'm telling you now that legalizing and decriminalizing does not get rid of trafficking and slavery in the sex industry. And like I said, I know that because I studied it. So in Germany, sex work is decriminalized, but what human rights folks have been finding is that women will still be trafficked, as in they will be forced to be somewhere physically or verbally, have their passports taken from them, locked in a room,
Indentured
not paid,
servitude,
exactly.
Yeah.
But
and
they'll have a contract which states that it's all legal,
Right.
and they'll have signed that contract. So everything
and
looks
they'll have
good.
been schooled that if someone from the government comes, here's the line you say to them.
Exactly.
I think
Yeah.
the other thing is as well, like,
It's not black and white.
there's always the gaps. So can you fly to Germany and apply for a visa as a sex worker?
Somebody else can. Okay, I don't know enough about that, to be honest.
Because that I see happening with let's partially decriminalise things, and you're like, as soon as you're like,
When visas get involved,
sex work
I don't know
happens,
how to.
right? But imagine then, but you're not like, we're not encouraging them to come here. So it's like, okay, so they will only be able to come here illegally, lying on a visa, which happens with a shady mafia organisation importing them,
So
doctoring their paperwork, right?
I guess if you want to hear a comparative example, we have a problem in the UK. There's a problem in the Gulf as well. So just to be clear, in the Gulf, there's something called the Kefler system, and the Kefler system is legalized slavery. So what you get is women from Asian and African countries coming to work as servants in often very wealthy Gulf nationals, and they are they go through a legitimate agency. They sign a contract. They they're going to be paid a certain amount. They're going to be tied to certain certain conditions. But then they get there, and the Kepler system means that the employer has the right to take away their passport and take away their they don't get paid anything. There's often a lot of abuse. And then what happens when they come to the UK on a visa, bringing their servant, essentially? That person is technically in a legally binding agreement, but yes, they are still indentured. They are still answering to cruelty. I don't know that we're getting off topic.
No,
here,
I think it's an important part of
that
the hard times women have.
Yeah, exactly. Legalizing isn't going to fix everything. That's the thing.
About.
Like, it's not. There are like, I don't know, or I don't even think there's a solution to everything. But decriminalization would definitely make a lot of people's lives easier. Sex work is going to exist whether people like it or not. And people are going to pay for it, and people are going to give it. And it's also important to acknowledge that there are plenty of women that want to give it. And that right shouldn't be taken away from them either.
Look at the surge of OnlyFans, especially in the last year, where because of lockdowns, people have had no options to work. And just more and more people going on webcams because that's
makes money.
I don't know if it's an easy dollar, but it's a dollar.
So full disclosure, and like my family and friends know this, to pay for my bachelor's and my master's degree, I worked as a model, mainly doing art nude work. I never did anything that I would class as pornographic, to be honest. Not that that should be judged, but I did lay a whole bunch naked in flowers and in the woods, and probably put myself in some situations that a lot of people would find dangerous. And there's a huge industry of that.
How much of recruitment is a lie anyway, where you show up and the job's not what you expected? How much of glamour models were told that it was artistic? Right?
Yeah.
So
this is a whole other topic of conversation. But the internet modeling industry is hugely problematic. I had maybe 2 dodgy situations, but luckily I was able to maintain composure. I turned around both times and I said, if you don't take me back home and pay me my £300 for this hour, I am going to call the police. I'm going to find your wife. I'm going to tell them. And if I ever see you on these websites again, I will report you to the police. Yeah. That worked both times.
Many people.
Not many people. No, like and this is the problem. So it's
and
one of.
I had she was an ex at the time, but she still asked me to come to her to a bunch of photo shoots.
Yeah.
Because she knew, that photographer, he pays well, but he will then try and fuck you.
Yeah. Everybody knows who they are. But the thing is that, so just to be clear, I had a great time. I had so much fun. I got to be 1,000 different characters and meet amazing people.
I was a computer animation model, which involved wearing Speedos and sitting in front of 20 people for hours at a time.
Well, there you go.
For weeks on end. At no point has anyone ever judged me for that job.
No,
it's exactly the same. How is it different?
No, but I do have to say that I know so many models who were raped or molested or had photos taken of the law at the time. It's changed now due to GDPR and stuff, but the law at the time basically meant that a photographer could take a photo of you and you didn't know exactly what they'd taken a photo of, and you would have no legal say against this. This was only about 10 years ago. So they would then...
So being like, it's fine, we can't see anything.
Yeah,
it's tastefully done, but it's not.
It's not, no. But I guess the thing is that I did it because it was the only way that I could pay my way. I don't come from a super wealthy background, but my parents helped me out as much as they could. But I wouldn't have... there were so many months where I had no money in my account, and that saved me. Because
you're not allowed to have a job while studying at Oxford and Cambridge, there is an escort service.
Yeah, that's a huge problem in universities in general.
If you're not from a wealthy family, you need to find some way to make the money, and there's a lot of poorer students who are at Oxford or Cambridge who are either writing essays to help rich, not so smart kids get into good universities, or sex work.
And it's the women that'll get into the sex work, and it's the men that'll get into the writing. And that, to me, do what you want, but the fact that there is an inherent, well, this is really, you know, all that there is for one side, and this is really all there is for the other side, does, for me, paint a wider societal issue. I'm
gonna have to pause there. Yeah, we'll have a break anyway, but you can't say it's the women that will get in sex work and the men not, because there's a lot. Well, okay, but there's a lot of gay escorts.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of trans.
But
sex
statistically
workers.
speaking, you know, it's like with trafficking. Like, yeah, there are definitely male victims of trafficking and sex work,
Cool.
but they do not make up the majority.
Do you want to talk about rape or not?
Yeah, I don't mind talking about rape. I guess.
We don't have to get personal, obviously.
No. I mean, you can get personal if you want. Would you like to get personal?
Yeah,
Or
I'm
yeah.
up for it, but that doesn't mean you have to.
I should start this by saying that one of the problems with the feminist movement is that it does, in my opinion, neglect some really important issues that other sides are having, which concerns me a great deal. So just going back to the human trafficking thing very briefly, the majority, the very 90% or even more of the research that there is focuses on trafficked and enslaved women, mainly in the sex sector, as opposed to men, which make up the very vast majority of the labour slavery sort of industry. And that personally concerns me because I feel that they are both issues that deserve attention, and one shouldn't supersede the other. And women have an easier time, I think, it's controversial to say, talking about rape than men, in my opinion.
The fragile backlash is huge. I don't think I've ever had a rape conversation with my male friends, and the one time I have, it's been very awkward.
Do you want to say more about that, or are you uncomfortable?
Yeah, let's go. I think I have an interesting perspective on this because I have been accused of rape. I've been in questionable circumstances that, looking back, I'm like, that could have been better. I think labelling it rape would have been unhelpful because of how strong a label that is.
Are we talking Aziz Ansari versus Weinstein?
Yeah. So I've been in, places where, for example, I was their employer. And they kept making moves on me, but it wasn't appropriate. And, okay, I was drunk. And that likewise, been places where the girl's been like, oh, no. But it's like, no doesn't always mean no. Which is a very uncomfortable thing to say, but it's the truth. No does sometimes mean, oh, we shouldn't be doing this. This is naughty.
Okay.
And it is a grey area. And I think it's important.
It can be a grey area.
Yes, it can be a grey area. And I think it's important to open up the channels of discussion rather than close them down, so we as men and women can work out how to move forward. Because if it becomes, I'm not sure if this is an aggression to say hysteria now, but if it's so emotional that we can't talk about it, then we can't improve things. And so I think often in courting and flirting, there is this grey area where, you need to pick up cues and have the social intelligence to pick up, oh, is she not interested? Or she is, she just doesn't want to appear easy. And it's part of the problem with how fucked up as a society we view sex and how uncomfortable we are talking about it. I think the new generation's getting much better in some ways. With this obvious exception of these sad.
Yeah, it's students in the UK are going to have specifically been requesting some sort of class on consent.
Yeah,
I find
and
that
if you talk to the
interesting.
right-wing press, that's like the worst thing in the world, and it's going to be the death of society.
Well,
But
just a conversation about consent. Like, what's the harm?
yeah.
It means that you have a space to talk about consent and your confusion about consent or your perspective on consent, and then so does the other side, which I agree. We shouldn't always just shut down the conversation.
Well, people need to learn from their mistakes, and at the moment, if you're branded a rapist, that's a bad thing. It makes it very hard to have a discussion with friends about. Whereas I think if more men talked openly, they would all probably, just as women do when they talk about it, I think a lot of men, if they were open and self-reflective, would be like, yeah, maybe I could have been more consenty in that interaction. Like, maybe that could have been more empathetic and caring. Maybe I drank a bit much on that first date with that girl and the lines got blurred in a way that I'm not comfortable with. But it's such a live wire. People are so uncomfortable talking about it that I think they avoid the self-reflection and they avoid the hard conversations. And as you say, the backlash is brutal. So just trying to be really honest, I think looking back, I think I'm, because I'm a big guy, gentler than most, and have probably many times had a girl desperately flirting with me and just been fucking clueless to all of the signals because, you know, I'm insecure, work from the assumption that I don't deserve love, and would never want to make someone feel intimidated or threatened. But I also think there's probably been times where, in hindsight, if I talked to that girl, I think she'd put my mind at ease that, no, that was okay. But also, yeah, we were both a bit drunk. And it's maybe, again, I think rape's the wrong word to put in. I don't want to put it near that bucket, but definitely would be worth considering and reflecting on and talking about. And I wish men did that more.
I think that's necessary. You have just reminded me of a modelling story of mine where I didn't stand up for myself because the circumstances were. So the story is, I was living somewhere very far away and rural at the time, and I'd just finished being a ballet dancer, and I was invited to do an underwater dance shoot in this very wealthy photographer's swimming pool. So I arrive, and so do another two models, and there's a whole crew with equipment and everything. We have a fantastic day, and everything's going well. And then the crew leave, and we're still in the pool, and we're nude. And all of a sudden, the photographer comes out, and he's naked, and he turns around to us, and he says, "You don't mind, ladies, this is my pool." And of course, we were in his house. We were supposed to spend the night. I'm very far away. I've spent the last bit of money I have on a very expensive train ticket. I need to get paid. What do? You know, I turn around and I say, nothing. I said nothing.
Yeah, that's a setup though, isn't it?
That is a setup. But...
And as well, at the time, if the guy's like a bit younger and more attractive, it's like...
No, he wasn't. He was...
Okay, but you know what I mean? Even the lines get blurred, but it's still wrong.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, I see men fall in that trap all the time as well, where they're like, oh, but I'm a nice creep.
Yeah. I mean, do you think... I mean,
these girls know what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, like, sometimes I wonder... Is he reflective about that? It was very Louis C.K. what he did. Now I kind of compare the two.
Right.
The situation that you were describing sounds distinctly more Aziz Ansari to me. So I guess this
mixed lines of communication, and misunderstandings, and bad flirting and bad dates, and people being unhappy.
As far as we were aware,
sometimes a power indifference.
As far as we were aware, because once again, we know what happened with Louis C.K. and the 13 people. And Aziz Ansari and the lady that came out with these with these allegations have said their parts, but I do think that in this particular case, it's difficult to side with one or the other because he just genuinely didn't realize that he was coming on too strong. Maybe.
Yeah. it's a pattern with photographers, trust.
Oh no, Aziz Ansari, but no, this guy.
It's the
this guy
problem as well
definitely
with the term rape. I think it's unhelpful.
No,
I think we
necessary.
need sexual.
Well, sexual assault. You know, you've got sexual assault, and you've got.
Yeah, and
that
then what's
sexual assault
lighter
can
from
mean-
that then? Like, we need the term for just being a bit of a creep. Because
I mean, it's sexual assault.
well, yeah, is the guy getting in the pool naked sexual assault?
Technically, yeah. By the legal definition, it would be classed as flashing in the UK.
Right. Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know.
fair enough. And it's different if you're skinny dipping in the pool and he's like, "Oh, skinny dipping." No, you were paid to do a job.
But can you imagine
And if you were in an office typing something, I wouldn't be like, "Oh, you don't mind if I get my dick out, do you, lady?" And it's the same thing. Actually.
But can you imagine if I'd gone to the police? Who would they have believed? This
Rich guy,
poor, woman that was naked in this man's pool with
rich,
two other
posh
women.
gentleman.
And the
I'm
rich,
I'm
posh
horrified. There's been a misunderstanding.
Shell executive is all I'm saying. But then that's a gendered thing as well. I know that there is a huge issue with men reporting their own that sexual violence that's been committed against them.
Oh, so let's get into that, because I did do
Yeah.
exactly what I promised I'd do, which was jump deep into the academic to avoid the personal.
Do you want to get really personal? Because I thought that you were going there.
No one listens to the last quarter of podcast, so this is the best place to bury my therapy. Yeah, I was raped twice. Once by a woman, which was funny.
Why was it funny?
Well, because that's how everyone perceived it. That's how it was treated. So I was too drunk, and she was younger and attractive, and I was walking her home and probably flirting with her, but that doesn't excuse it.
They do that in movies all the time.
It wouldn't if the gender roles were flipped, right?
Female assault.
Yes. 41st Dates is the famous example where he gets raped and has to apologise for it. It's amazing.
Yeah. There's been
and
pop culture detective does a whole really good video.
Blackout drunk, fall on the floor. She, I don't know actually. Did she pull my trousers down? Was I going to do it while conscious and then passed out halfway through? It's a blurred line that I'm making apologies for, that I'm not sure would happen if I was a woman and it was a guy. Right? If I was unconscious in the street on the floor and a guy was having a go, that would definitely only be perceived one way. So she was bouncing up and down on top of me. I got found by my sisters because we were running around the corner of our house, right? This is New Year's Eve. And my sisters think it's hilarious and go back to get their friends and come back. And then they, at that point, realise I haven't moved for 5 minutes. So I'm actually unconscious. So, okay, get rid of her. Send her home, pick me up, pull my trousers on, take me upstairs, and I pass out and I wake up the next morning having no idea, but come downstairs and it's just the funniest thing ever that the whole family's laughing about. And my only take on that is, please don't tell anyone, for 2 reasons. And again, this speaks a lot to how we view sex and the gender differences between how sex is treated. I knew it would be a nightmare for her as a 15-year-old girl to have this story go around her school. And I knew it'd be a nightmare for me as an 18-year-old guy to have that story be heard by her parents. And so I was just like, we just bury this. We never speak of this again. This is the body in the woods the family never mentions again. And that was so successful that 4 months later, her mum asked me to be her French and Spanish tutor, which is the most awkward time of my life. I had to tutor the girl that had raped me.
Why did you say yes?
Because I panicked and I didn't want to say, oh no, I don't want to tutor your daughter because she raped me. And my mum didn't think it would be inappropriate for me to, because it's a job and it's important that men are employed. So yes, I ended up in the most awkward setting ever. And again, I felt more sorry for her than I did for myself, because she remembered the thing and I didn't, and she was super embarrassed and awkward about it.
Yeah.
So that's just a clusterfuck of horrible stories that I've just dumped on you. But the point is, it's messy, and that's often what's
it can be, yeah.
not got into with people that see very binary on these things, either believe all women, huge percentages of men are rapey. We need to entirely reform the police because da-da-da. And then on the other side, the anti-feminist arguments that, it's just boys being boys, and but like girls should be chaperoned, and this is why monogamy is a good thing, and da-da-da. I think there's so many bullshit charlatans taking air out of this when there needs to be a nuanced and serious conversation, because there are no easy answers. As I say, it's very hard to police a crime that doesn't have a witness. There's a lot of things which are creepy, over the line, sexually inappropriate without being outright sexual abuse. And if we could have those clear categories and definitions, it'd be much easier for people to learn and discuss and be like, yeah, dude, that was just inappropriate. Like, you could have done better, right? As soon as the R word gets thrown around, things escalate quickly, right?
So then I guess I should ask, France implemented not so long ago, or is implementing, I don't know if it actually happened, a misogyny, anti-misogyny law. What do you think of that?
I'm not familiar with it.
What's
the law?
So you can be fined, for example, for something like catcalling. No, I haven't looked into the intricacies of the law. I have read news articles about it, so it's probably a lot more complicated than that. But a couple of weeks ago, I was having a conversation with some relatives, and they were the people that two male relatives, and they brought it up to me, and they said, this is the problem with feminists. This is ridiculous. How am I supposed to go up to a woman without fear that they're going to accuse me of something? And my response was, well, first of all, if women are afraid of being approached, I mean, that's complicated as well. That probably has a history, a very crappy history behind it. But also,
do you know the best metaphor I've heard of this? What? And you probably are familiar with it. How would a guy feel if a gay guy was doing it to them?
Yes.
Right? Like, so how would you feel?
Yeah.
Every time you walked past a building site, all the gay builders treated you in a way that
absolutely.
This law is trying to protect against. And that's it. I think it's really easy for people to forget the power imbalance. I don't walk home afraid ever. I've lived in Rio de Janeiro. I've grown up and been to Nigeria and some of the weirdest places in India. Like, never really, but I'm just a big man, and there's nothing people want from me, right? Like, potentially you get robbed for being mugged, but that's why I always dress like shit. And even that is born of fear and having to be careful, and so women have to do that all the time. You talk to women who talk about having their keys in their fist, right?
Standard.
Like, playing with their phone, pretending to be on a phone call. Like,
I used to carry.
Men don't understand that. I don't know why they're badgering women as if they understand this argument and the nuance of it.
So I have a straight male friend that recently tried to counter. So for the listeners that don't know, about a month or two ago, there was a very famous case in the media. A young lady went missing called Sarah Everard. She was just walking home from her friend's house. It was like 8:30 in the evening. And it turned out in the end that she was actually, we don't know the full circumstances around this yet, picked up somehow by an off-duty police officer and murdered in a different location. These are the things that we know right now. So his response was, well, as a man, I always have to be worried about male violence. Somebody could start a fight with me in the street. And when I turned around and I said to him was, okay, well, but as a woman, I have to worry about that, but I also have to worry about the sexual assault aspect. So I don't know a single woman that doesn't do the key thing. I used to carry around a travel-sized can of spray deodorant in my pocket, which I used twice on some very, very unfortunate situations with men. Spray them in the eyes because mace isn't allowed. I always have to plan where I'm going. I have to think about the time. I have to think about, are there lots of cars around, or lots of houses around? Not that helped poor Sarah Everard.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it is, and then not just that, you have like societal things like, a woman or a girl will be more likely to be told by parents or friends, text me when you get back, text me on the way, call me on the way, don't go out so late, don't wear that, these things. And then obviously that goes back to the onus is then put on the potential victim, for want of another term.
So the counter argument to this, and I don't think it's a strong one, but is that we do already tell men not to rape. It is illegal. We already do tell men not to kill. It is illegal.
Yeah, but then I guess my question to you is, globally, men are by far and likely to commit violent crime than women.
I think it was a Quillette article, and I'm a massive, what's the opposite of fan of Quillette? But
hater?
It was an interesting article nonetheless, and it said that in their study, 30% of men surveyed, take that statistic with a pinch of salt, but still it's telling. If they were asked if you could rape someone and never be caught and there would be no consequence, they were like, yeah, I'd go for it. And I said that to my mum, and she was like, "Oh my god, that must be wrong." I think if I said that to men, they'd be like, "Yeah,
with no one
no
else
consequence,
around.
No one else around, no chance of getting caught, no bad karma, no bad." 30%, yeah, there's probably 30% of bad ones out there. Probably, yeah.
Well, there's a lot more than that, and then I guess these are the
Well,
questions. These are the questions.
You think more
that...
than 30% of men
No,
are sexually abusing?
No,
there's a lot more to dig down on.
Yeah, there's a lot more to dig down
sorry.
on. Like, the thing is, one has to ask why, on a global scale, is it always men? And when I say always, I'm talking about the 90% here, and it is serial killers, domestic violence, assault, mass shooters, terrorists. Like, and the statistics are the same in every single country. There are studies which are looking at specifically with regards to serial killers, whether testosterone plays a part. So they've tested some of the very few female mass murderers or serial killers that exist, and they've found in certain cases high levels of testosterone. So that could explain it. And I guess there's a whole nature-nurture argument to be made here, but it is still, like, what do you think is going on?
So you're stepping into, like, my academic background of evolutionary psychology here. That doesn't surprise me at all. I think we are, and this is important, I don't think people misquoting evolutionary psychology studies get this right often enough. Either the detractors or the people that are using it to justify things. I don't think you can derive an ought from an is. So just because a percentage of men are more likely to do X because of that doesn't make it right or acceptable. Likewise, you can't dismiss evolutionary psychology as a field just because sometimes it suggests men have tendencies which society would rather not have. It's important to study and see what the numbers suggest, and exactly that, like, people have the capacity for great violence.
The problem is men and not women, and I want to understand why.
You do already, testosterone. So,
well, that's one explanation.
So it's fascinating watching what happens. And one, I think, is that we're only here because we've all survived being on the right end of a genocide. The whole of human history has been always the possibility of war. And I think, if we're honest, there's probably been war every day that humanity's existed forever. Right, we have this huge
started by men, by the way.
that's not fair, and I would say that...
When's that not been true?
There are examples such as the Amazons, and there's
Hang on, which war in the Amazon are you talking about?
the Amazonian women, but you know those big ladies and the classical
are
paintings.
myths?
Well, yeah, and it's funny how in the myths they came up. There's lots of statues and murals of them being killed by men, and that was the propaganda that was put up on the walls. Women know your place. I think. Yes, mostly men, fine.
They do.
I don't think it's an interesting tangent to go off on, but clearly there are women who served in the armed forces today. So,
Yeah.
So
And
women are capable, but yes,
Yeah.
there's a big thing, and it's part of to the victor go the spoils. Look at how we treat athletes. I think is how we would have treated war heroes back when we had big popular wars, right? The tall, strong, handsome, strapping man that's just killed a lot of the evil Nazis and comes back and probably has a whale of a time. And it's the same how we treat, a football Premier League star now. We have a huge propensity, instinct, capacity for violence. And I'm really glad we live in a society where we're trying to push that out. But it's dangerously, worryingly naive to forget how much of history has been brutal and aggressive and think that we can wash it out just because we've had... And again, even to describe, 30 years of peace. Well, no. We've had 30 years of peace here. There's plenty of countries we, in our country, are dropping bombs on.
Yes.
So there's still violence raging. It's just we've outsourced it. Like we have with most of globalization,
Yes.
We've outsourced our violence. So it's far away and we don't have to worry about the external price. But we still live in societies that profit from the fact that we bomb places so they can make sure we get oil at a good enough price for our economies to run and grow. So we are still incredibly violent. And I agree it's horrible, but is it surprising to you? Like, I'm not saying it's acceptable, but
I never said it was surprising. It just, we
are the deadliest species on the planet.
The male of the species are the deadliest people on the planet, statistically speaking.
Yeah, but women eat meat too. Women prosper from the wars too. Women wave the flag and sleep with the troops. Like,
whoa, okay, now you're getting into other territory, but yeah.
No, but women find a war hero attractive.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. That's not what I meant. That's not what I thought you meant either.
No.
Okay.
Well, women there's lots of female patriots and support our troops.
And there is a problem.
Love a man in uniform.
And there is a problem with imperial feminists using the feminist narrative to
we need to bomb the toxic masculinity out of Saudi Arabia. If we only bomb Yemen enough, then women will have rights there, right?
Yeah, and if we get women in the military, then we're more of a feminist institution.
Yeah, if the concentration camps are guarded by a more diverse panel of guards. That's the Democrats' dream, right?
I think it's important to speak to the faults of the feminist movement as it is to the graces, but then I do maintain,
as we've alluded to, from a position of understanding and from a position of steel manning. Find the smartest people in the room, find the greatest authors, listen, understand that. As a men's right activist Jordan Peterson fan, you might not have a shit hot take on feminism. It's just a shit take that's based on a straw man of the weakest ideas of just pointing and being like, oh look, someone said something wrong on a YouTube channel. Let's go send her rape threats in the comments.
Yeah, let's go full Gamergate. I shouldn't bring that up, I'm sure, but never mind.
No, that really is where I want to end it. The point that there is so much to learn.
And so much to do. Yeah.
And I think the culture war bullshit tweaks the serotonin. It's our war. Keyboard warriors, right? But yeah. as with most things, if you talk to the smartest, most well-read people, that there's a lot to learn. I don't think any Gamergate bros are listening at this point. Hopefully I might give this episode a less clickbaity title,
I think you should
so
give
feminists can appreciate it and listen to it.
I think
and
you
if
should
they
give
have
it
some
a clickbaity title. Do it.
But yeah, and if feminists have some negative feedback for me and some of the things I've said, I still welcome it, because I am not here announcing that I have learned the feminism. It is a journey, not a destination. I am continuing to listen and learn. But I do hope that people listen and have learned from this too.
Yeah. I hope that people, the one thing that I really want from people is for them not to fear feminism, because it's really not scary and it's not anything to worry about. Like,
can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
That is the greatest marketing campaign.
Don't fear feminism?
Yeah, I would take that to like 100x and put that on every billboard.
Well, you're
like
the salesperson, so
yeah, no, I'm telling you,
give a woman a leg up, and
it always
sell
gets
that.
couched in
Not in a
terms
proper
of like, they're attacking us, they're destroying society, and we're the warriors and we're brave, and I think that just cuts through. It's like, are you scared of feminism? Like, really does highlight the fact that yeah, sorry, what are you afraid of, bro? Why is there this fragile backlash?
Well,
and
apparently,
I think the left
you know,
sometimes gets too academic, and I think it gets too austere and too serious. And a bit of humour goes a long way. I think pointing out that, sorry, why are you scared of this? Flips it, that it's not about us and we're right, and it's not about you and you're wrong, but it's about, why aren't you hearing us though? What about us intimidates you? What scares you?
Look, I know in the past we threw hatchets at politicians and threw ourselves onto equestrian pitches and self-immolated and everything, but that's kind of not our brand these days. So, you know, once again, nothing to fear.
It's more about getting angry on Twitter, I've noticed.
Yeah, and so does
but that's everyone's
yeah,
going.
exactly, that's everyone.
Becs, it has been
I did, thank you. It was really lovely to talk to you, and thank you for sharing your difficult stories, which I do recognise that as a man is probably more difficult to do. I hope that you are not judged too harshly for that, but also for the kind of conversation that we've had today, just because, as you can probably hear in my voice, I don't feel offended, and hashtag don't fear the feminists. I don't know if you should include that you're accused of rape story. I'm just saying. It's up to you. I think it's up to you. But I think you know above anyone else.
a difficult thing to have next to your name. It's a bad.
No, not me. Not me.
No, me.
I was going to say you, yeah. No, me,
Next to my
nothing,
reputation,
you know,
it would be taken as a soundbite out of context.
yeah. So, and you don't know what you're going to get into. Like, you're a Labour campaigner right now. Like, let's just say you want to get on the council in the future and somebody finds that, they will use it against you. The opposition and your compatriots? Is this the right word in English?
Yes,
yeah.
frenemies within the party would
Yeah.
probably be the worst ones.
Yeah.
Ones to leak it to the
Exactly. Or someone that, you know, just didn't like you or whatever. I'd be really careful with that. But I'll leave it up to you. Good.
I told you I needed that therapy.
Yeah, you did. I hope that I didn't respond in a way that has made you feel bad in any way.
No, not.
I'm grateful that you shared that shit.
Oh, it's a tough chat.
Yeah.
And I don't want the takeaway of that story isn't believe all rapists. You know what I mean? I don't want to be that guy. Like,
you're not recording right now, right?
I am. Yeah.
No, I don't know. Are you?
Yes.
No, you're
that's
not.
Right. People talk so much better.
Oh my
when
God,
you
no.
think you stop recording.
That's terrible. Please don't include this bit.
Okay, I'll stop recording and I'll show you I've stopped recording.